The human warship had been cruising through the vast, uncharted depths of space for months. The crew was used to the silence of the cosmos, the only sounds being the hum of the engines and the occasional creak of the ship's frame. But today, something was different. The atmosphere on board was thick with tension as the ship's sensors suddenly began to pick up an unusual signal. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a faint blip, barely noticeable against the endless sea of stars. But as the seconds ticked by, the blip grew stronger, more pronounced. Commander Alex Carter stood in the control room, eyes fixed on the screens. The ship's AI was processing the signal, trying to make sense of it. "What do we have?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with concern. "Unidentified ships, sir," replied Lieutenant Sarah Diaz, her fingers flying across the console. "At least 5 large vessels, moving at high speed. They're coming right at us." The crew fell silent. For months, they'd been exploring the edges of known space, hoping to make contact with alien civilizations, but they had never expected this. The ships weren't following any known patterns. They were moving with purpose, and that purpose was towards them. There was no sign of aggression, no hostile movement, but that didn't put anyone at ease. "Raise shields," Carter ordered, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Prepare for the worst, but let's try to stay calm. We don't know if they're hostile yet." As the ship's shields hummed to life, the officers began monitoring every inch of the surrounding space. The unknown vessels grew closer, their massive forms becoming clearer with each passing moment. They were unlike anything the humans had ever seen, sleek, dark, and with strange symbols etched into their surfaces, glowing faintly like stars on the edge of a nebula. Ensign Mark Riley, stationed at communications, adjusted his headset. "I'm trying to hail them." "Sir." "No response so far." "They're jamming our signals." The word sent a shiver down the crew's spine. Jamming was a common tactic used by hostile forces to prevent communication, but the fact that these ships weren't responding in any way was more troubling than anything else. Carter's mind raced. "Keep trying. We need to establish some kind of communication. And fast." As the seconds ticked by, the alien ships continued to approach, their eerie silence becoming more and more unnerving. The warship was outclassed in terms of firepower, and without knowing the intentions of the aliens, the crew had no idea how to react. Were they here to invade? Or were they something far more dangerous, something that had been watching them from the shadows of the galaxy? In the midst of this, a sudden flicker of light caught their attention. One of the alien ships was moving into position directly in front of the warship. It didn't attack. Instead, it stopped. A massive holographic projection appeared, casting an image of a towering figure. The figure was alien, but its form was humanoid, with sharp features and an otherworldly presence. The crew couldn't take their eyes off of it, mesmerized by the sheer magnitude of the projection. "This is a message," Diaz muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. "They want to communicate." Carter felt his pulse quicken. "Put it on the main screen." The alien figure's eyes glowed, and a low, resonant voice filled the room, speaking in a language that no one on the ship understood. It was deep, almost musical, and yet it held an unsettling power. There was something in the cadence of the voice that suggested an intelligence far beyond anything the humans had encountered before. "We've intercepted their transmission," Riley said, his voice shaking. "It's a language we've never encountered. I can't translate it." Just as the tension seemed unbearable, the alien figure's eyes flashed brightly, and the voice ceased. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, in a voice that was clearer, more deliberate, the alien spoke again. "You are not ready. Yet." The crew was stunned. The message was short, cryptic, and chilling. What did it mean? And why had they been singled out? Carter's mind raced. "Prepare a response. Something simple. Tell them we mean no harm." But before the officers could react, the alien fleet began moving again. The ships didn't attack, But they shifted positions, surrounding the warship. It was clear now that they weren't here for a casual visit. They were positioning themselves, waiting for something. "We're trapped," Riley muttered under his breath. "No," Carter replied, his eyes narrowing. "They want something. We just need to figure out what it is before it's too late." The ships around them were silent, their massive forms looming like shadows in the cold darkness of space. The crew was on edge, knowing that one wrong move could set off a deadly chain reaction. They could only wait, hoping that whatever these aliens had planned, they would be able to survive it. But deep inside, Carter knew that this encounter would be unlike anything humanity had ever faced. The aliens weren't just powerful, they were ancient, and whatever they were planning, it would change everything. As the warship drifted through the darkness, surrounded by ships that seemed to belong to a civilization far older and wiser than theirs, Carter's thoughts raced. Were these beings the same ones that had shaped the galaxy long ago, or were they something new, something even more dangerous? The mystery deepened as the alien fleet began to pulse with energy, their ships aligning in a perfect formation. Carter turned to his crew, his voice steady, though his heart was pounding. "Stay sharp. Whatever happens next, we're in this together. We have to be." The crew braced themselves as the lights of the alien ships began to pulse with a rhythmic intensity, like the beating of some distant heart. They were no longer just visitors. They were here with purpose. But what that purpose was, no one could say. The tension in the room was palpable. No one knew if this was the beginning of a new chapter for humanity or the end of it. One thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The alien ships moved in closer, their strange energy filling the void of space, and the crew of the warship had no choice but to face the unknown. The massive warship drifted silently through the void of space, its engines humming softly, a beacon of human ingenuity. For months, it had ventured far from Earth, exploring the farthest reaches of known space. Commander Alex Carter stood on the bridge, staring at the endless stars that stretched beyond the reach of their sensors. But today, the stars felt closer, dangerously so. Something was out there. "Commander, we've detected a fleet," Lieutenant Sarah Diaz reported, her voice steady but tinged with concern. "It's coming directly at us." Carter's eyes narrowed as he walked toward the holographic map. On it, several blips began to form, moving in formation, at a speed too fast for anything human-made. 5 massive ships, each one far larger and more advanced than any vessel the humans had ever seen. "What's their trajectory?" Carter asked, his voice low. "They're locking onto us," Diaz replied, her fingers flying over the controls. "Whatever they are, they're heading straight for the warship." The crew on the bridge fell into a tense silence. Everyone knew what it meant to be followed by unknown ships in the vast emptiness of space. And yet, the silence was all the more chilling because these ships didn't make a sound, didn't make any attempt at communication. They were simply there, like shadows creeping closer. "Get us ready for a fight," Carter commanded. "Raise shields, power up all weapon systems. Let's show them we're not easy prey." A low hum filled the air as the ship shields activated, and the weapons systems powered up, the crew readying themselves for whatever was about to happen. There was no way of knowing if these ships were friendly, or if they came with hostile intent. And in space, where one wrong move could lead to annihilation, the uncertainty was enough to send a shiver down anyone's spine. "Captain, I'm still trying to hail them," Ensign Mark Riley reported, his voice strained as he tapped away at the communications panel. "They're not responding to our signals. There's a massive communication blockade. We can't get through." Carter's jaw tightened. "Keep trying. I want answers." As the alien ships closed in, the warship's sensors began to pick up their true scale. These weren't just any ships. They were colossal. Each one was easily 10 times the size of their own vessel, its design sleek and intimidating. There were no visible weapons, no obvious ports or windows, just dark, glossy surfaces covered with strange markings that seemed to shift as the ships moved. The symbols were unlike anything the crew had ever seen, pulsating faintly in the darkness. Minutes passed in tense silence. Carter paced the bridge, his mind racing. Were these ship scouts, an advanced alien race, or something much worse, predators that had been watching them from the depths of space? The possibilities seemed endless, and yet all of them were terrifying. His fingers drummed against the arm of his chair. Finally, the alien fleet stopped, their ships hovering in place. They were now positioned in a perfect circle around the warship, a strange, almost ritualistic formation. The tension in the command center of the warship was unbearable. Commander Carter stood at the helm, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of his console. The crew was on edge, waiting for some sign, some action, that would tell them what to do next. The alien ships surrounded them, silent and unyielding, their dark forms looming like specters in the endless void of space. "Captain," Lieutenant Diaz said, her voice tight with anxiety, "we've tried everything. No response from them, no further action, nothing. They're just watching." Carter looked out the view screen at the enormous ships. There was something deeply unsettling about their stillness. It was as if the very act of waiting was part of some larger plan, one that the humans couldn't understand. "What do they want from us?" he muttered to himself, more than anyone else. "They've shown their power. They could destroy us with a flick of their fingers if they wanted to." His thoughts were interrupted by Ensign Riley. "Captain, I got something strange. The energy field around their ships, it's fluctuating. It's not just static anymore." "What do you mean?" Carter asked sharply. "I can't be sure, but it looks like they're preparing something. I think they might be trying to communicate again," Riley said, eyes wide as he stared at the display in front of him. "How?" Carter asked, now more curious than ever. Before Riley could respond, the room was filled with a deep hum, a vibration that seemed to shake the walls of the ship. The crew flinched, their heads snapping to the view screen, where one of the alien ships began to pulse with a strange energy. It wasn't like the beam from before, more like a gentle, rhythmic wave of light rolling through the ship's hull. The light grew in intensity, a soft glow that surrounded the entire warship. Then, as if in response to the pulse, a holographic message appeared on the bridge. This time, it wasn't a towering alien figure, but a complex pattern of shifting symbols, so intricate that they made the crew dizzy just looking at them. They were the same symbols that had been etched into the ships, mysterious, almost hypnotic in their complexity. "Get the translator online now," Carter barked. He couldn't understand what was happening, but he knew they had to make sense of this before things got worse. Riley worked furiously at the console, trying to decrypt the symbols. The ship's AI hummed and buzzed in the background, attempting to process the unknown data. It felt like an eternity. But finally, Riley's voice broke through the tense silence. "I've got it, sir. The symbols. They're a form of communication, a language we've never encountered. But I think I've translated part of it. It's a message." "Put it on screen," Carter commanded. The symbols began to shift, moving like liquid, rearranging themselves into a clearer, more decipherable pattern. At first, it seemed like a jumble of random shapes and colors, but gradually they began to form words, English words. It was slow at first, each symbol flickering in and out of existence before it solidified into something readable. The message on the screen read, "You are an anomaly. You are not like the others. You will be tested." The crew stared at the words in shock. A test? A test of what? And what did they mean by not like the others? Carter's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just some form of greeting. It was a challenge to the crew, to humanity. The aliens were offering them something, testing them, but for what purpose? And why had they singled out the human warship? "We have to respond," Carter said, his mind racing. "They're offering us something. They want to test us. This could be our chance to learn more, to make contact." "How do we respond, sir?" Diaz asked, her voice tense. "We don't even know what kind of test they're talking about. If we refuse, what happens?" "We don't have the luxury of refusing," Carter replied, his jaw clenched. "We can't afford to make enemies of these beings. Not yet. We have to play along. But we'll be careful. We'll be ready for whatever they throw at us." The room fell silent again as the crew processed his words. Everyone knew that whatever happened next, it would change the course of humanity's future. If they passed the test, they could be given access to the kind of knowledge and technology that would advance humanity by centuries. But if they failed, no one wanted to think about that. "All right," Carter said, breaking the silence. "Prepare for the test. We don't know what form it will take, but we'll be ready. And if it's a trap, we fight. We don't back down." As the crew began preparing for whatever the aliens had planned, Riley continued to study the symbols on the screen. They were still shifting, changing, as if the message was alive, constantly evolving. "I think there's more to this," he muttered, eyes glued to the display. "I don't think we've seen the whole picture yet." Just as Carter was about to ask Riley what he meant, the entire warship jolted, throwing everyone off balance. Alarms blared as the ship shook violently. It was as though the alien fleet had made its move. "Shields up," Carter shouted, but it was too late. The ship's hull groaned under the strain of an invisible force, something powerful, but unseen. The crew struggled to regain their footing as the warship rocked back and forth. Riley's voice cracked through the chaos. "Captain, the energy readings, those pulses, they're intensifying. The alien ship's air." Before he could finish, the bridge fell into darkness. The lights flickered and then went out completely, leaving only the dim emergency lights casting eerie shadows across the walls. The crew was plunged into an unsettling quiet. "Commander," Diaz said, her voice tense with uncertainty. "What's happening?" Carter could barely hear her over the pounding of his own heartbeat. He knew they were on the brink of something monumental. Whatever these aliens had planned, it was happening now. But whether it would be a test of humanity's strength, intelligence, or survival, only time would tell. As the warship continued to shake under the invisible assault, Carter steeled himself. There was no turning back now. He looked at his crew, their faces filled with fear and determination. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. "Brace yourselves," he ordered. "Whatever comes next, we face it head-on." The test was about to begin, and nothing would ever be the same again. The warship shuddered violently as the energy pulses from the alien fleet intensified, the unseen force rattling the vessel to its core. Alarms blared in every corner of the ship, but the crew was no longer certain if the sound was real or if it was just a product of the growing tension and fear that gripped them all. The lights flickered again, casting the room in brief, erratic flashes of red and blue as the crew scrambled to secure their stations. Commander Carter's heart pounded in his chest, but his face remained calm, determined. There was no room for panic now. This was the moment they had prepared for, the test that would define not only their survival, but the future of humanity in this vast, mysterious universe. "Status report," Carter barked. Lieutenant Diaz was the first to respond, her voice sharp despite the chaos around them. "Shields are holding, but barely, sir. Whatever they're doing, it's draining our power systems. It's like they're feeding off our energy." "We need to get a full read on what's happening," Riley said, his voice laced with urgency. His fingers flew over his console as he scanned the alien ships. "There's a massive buildup of energy from their fleet. I think they're preparing to unleash something catastrophic." Carter's mind raced. They weren't just being tested, they were being pushed to their limits. Whatever these beings were doing, they were trying to provoke a response, trying to see how the humans would react under pressure. "Are we under attack?" Carter asked, his voice low. "It's not an attack." "Not exactly," Riley responded, his brow furrowed. "They're manipulating energy, forcing us to respond to their power. It's like a test of endurance, like they're trying to see how long we can withstand it." A deep rumbling noise reverberated through the warship as the shaking intensified, and the crew braced themselves for whatever was coming next. It felt like the very fabric of space was being torn apart around them, the walls creaking and groaning under the strain. "Hold steady," Carter shouted. "Don't let the pressure break us. We stand strong. If they want to see what we're made of, then let's show them." For a moment, the shaking grew worse. Then, suddenly, it stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, and the crew held their breath, unsure if this was the calm before the storm or if they had somehow passed the first stage of the test. But before anyone could speak, a brilliant white light filled the entire bridge. It was blinding, overpowering, and the crew instinctively shielded their eyes. Then, just as suddenly, it was gone. The light faded, and when they looked up, the entire alien fleet had changed position. They had rearranged themselves, now forming an intricate geometric pattern in space, each ship hovering in perfect alignment, as though waiting for the next stage of the test to begin. "Did we just?" Diaz started, but her words trailed off. Riley squinted at the monitor in front of him. I think we've passed the first phase. The energy pulses stopped, but now they're waiting. I don't know how long we have before they try something else." Carter stared at the alien ships, his mind spinning. It was clear now that this was no random encounter. This was a deliberate challenge, a test to see if humanity was worthy of something far beyond what they had ever imagined. But what did these aliens want? And what were they willing to sacrifice to prove themselves capable? The bridge grew quieter, each crew member lost in their own thoughts as they observed the alien fleet. The silence stretched on, the stillness between the ships almost oppressive. It was a standoff, a contest of wills. The warship could not move. Their systems were drained, their power reserves dwindling with every passing second. Finally, the silence was broken by a low hum, distant but undeniable. The sound reverberated through the ship, and a new hologram materialized in front of them. This time, the figure was not the alien entity from before. It was something different, something even more ancient in appearance. The being appeared as a towering figure, its skin covered in what looked like intricate, crystalline armor, its eyes glowing with an intense energy. It spoke, not in the language of humans, but through something far more unsettling. The voice wasn't just heard, it was felt. It was a vibration that seemed to penetrate the very bones of every person on the bridge. "You have withstood the first trial," the voice said, not in words, but in pure thought, transmitted directly into the minds of the crew. "But there is more to come. You must prove your worth. To survive, to advance, you must show us your strength." The message hung in the air, pregnant with meaning. It was a challenge, a test that could not be ignored. The aliens had decided. They would test humanity in ways they hadn't yet begun to understand. A deep, resonant rumble shook the ship again, and the crew braced themselves as the alien ships began to move once more. They were no longer simply circling. They were moving into position, forming an intricate web of energy that crackled with power. A massive wave of energy surged outward, rippling through space like a shockwave, and the warship's sensors began to go haywire. "Shields are weakening," Diaz shouted. "Captain, whatever they're doing, it's draining our systems at an accelerated rate. We can't take much more of this." Carter gritted his teeth. "We can't let them break us. Hold the line. Whatever this next phase is, we'll face it together." But just as the words left his mouth, the entire warship began to shake once more, this time more violently than before. The alien fleet's energy field surged around them like a storm, and the warship groaned under the pressure. The lights flickered again, and Carter's heart raced as he glanced at the crew. Fear and determination mirrored in their eyes. Then, in an instant, the warship was enveloped in a blinding light. It was as though the entire ship had been swallowed whole by the alien energy, and for a moment, Carter feared they had been defeated. The light was suffocating, leaving no space between the ship and the strange energy. The crew gasped for breath, as though something was pulling the air from their lungs. Then, the light abruptly vanished. The warship was floating in an unfamiliar place. Space was still around them, but it felt different, warped. The stars themselves seemed distorted, twisted in ways that defied logic. The alien ships were gone, leaving only an empty void where they had once been. Carter blinked, unsure if what he was seeing was real. The ship was intact, but they were no longer in the same place. The stars had changed. The galaxy had shifted. There was something wrong. Something profoundly wrong. "Where are we?" Diaz whispered, as though the question alone might shatter the fragile peace they had just entered. Carter's eyes narrowed. "I don't know. But whatever it is, it's only just begun." They had passed the test. But the true challenge was only now unfolding. The aliens weren't just watching them anymore. They had opened a doorway, and the crew of the warship had no choice but to step through. The next phase of their trial had begun. The warship drifted silently in the strange, distorted void. The stars warped and twisted like glass under pressure. The familiar hum of the engines was barely audible, and yet the ship seemed to vibrate with an unknown energy. Commander Carter stared out of the view screen, his mind racing. The alien ships were gone, vanished as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving behind an unsettling emptiness. And the galaxy itself had changed. "Where are we, Captain?" Diaz's voice broke through the tension in the room. She was standing by the comms console, staring at the flickering redouts. "This place, it doesn't make sense. The stars, the space around us, it's all wrong." Carter turned toward her, his mind still trying to process what had happened. The last thing he remembered was the ship being surrounded by alien energy, and then the blinding light. Now, they were here. But where was here? "I don't know," he said, his voice grim. "But I don't think we're in our galaxy anymore. Something about this place. It's as though reality itself has been altered." The crew fell silent, each person lost in their thoughts as they tried to comprehend their new reality. The warship's sensors continued to flicker, struggling to make sense of the strange, warped space around them. Nothing was where it should be. The gravitational pull was different. Time seemed to stretch in odd ways. Every single reading was out of sync with what they knew. "We're stuck here," Riley muttered, still typing furiously at his console. "Our communication systems are completely scrambled. I can't get a signal. The comms network it's been distorted." "Are we receiving anything from the aliens?" Carter asked. He needed to know if this was part of their test, or if they had been abandoned in a place they could not return from. "No," Riley said, shaking his head. "It's like they never existed. No signals, no energy readings, nothing. It's just us." The unsettling silence deepened, and Carter felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. This was not a situation he had prepared for. He had expected a test, perhaps a challenge of strength or intellect. But this felt different. The aliens had opened a door, and now they were in a place where the very laws of space and time seemed to have no meaning. Carter took a deep breath, forcing his mind to stay focused. "All right," he said, turning to face his crew. "We've been thrown into something beyond our comprehension, but we're still here, still alive. Whatever it is, we'll face it together. We need to figure out what's going on, and we need to do it fast." Diaz nodded, her face set with determination. "I'll run a full scan of our surroundings. Maybe we can get a better understanding of what's happening." The ship's engines hummed softly, struggling to maintain their power. As Diaz worked at her console, Carter walked over to the view screen, watching the strange landscape outside. The stars. No, they didn't look like stars at all. Some were stretched out in long, distorted lines, while others shimmered in irregular patterns. They seemed almost alive, pulsating in strange rhythms, as if the very fabric of space was breathing. "We need to get answers," Carter said, his voice steady. And I'm not waiting here to be a lab rat for whoever brought us here. We'll find a way out. Captain, Riley said suddenly, a note of urgency in his voice. You need to see this. Carter turned, crossing the room in quick strides. Riley had a new set of data on the screen, a map, but not of their galaxy. The familiar stars they had known were replaced by strange, unrecognizable constellations. The map was a maze of interconnected paths, some bright, some dark, but all leading to somewhere. Where is this? Carter asked, his brow furrowing. I don't know, Riley replied, his voice tense. But this map, it's showing a path, a trail through this warped space, like it's directing us somewhere. Could it be the aliens? Carter asked, though his voice held little hope. Are they guiding us? I don't think so, Riley answered. The trail, it doesn't feel like a friendly one. It's almost like an invitation, or a lure. Carter's stomach twisted. A lure? He looked out the view screen again. The distorted stars twinkled in the empty void, some brighter than others, but none offering any comfort. It felt as though they were being pulled toward something, an unknown destination, hidden deep within the folds of this strange dimension. Yes, Riley continued, his voice low. It's like a beacon, and I think we have no choice but to follow it. If we don't, we could be stuck here forever, Carter finished, his mind already calculating the risks. They had no idea where they were, how long they could survive without power, or if they would ever find their way back. But there was something else too, a gut feeling that told him they had to follow this strange path, no matter how dangerous it might be. All right, Carter said, decisively. Plot a course. We follow the trail. Whatever it is, we'll face it head-on. Diaz nodded, already working at the navigation console. The warship's engines powered up, the ship slowly beginning to move through the strange, distorted space. The stars outside seemed to bend as they passed through them, like the ship was pushing through a wall of unseen energy. Carter gripped the armrest of his chair, keeping his focus on the view screen. He could feel the uncertainty creeping back into his mind, but he pushed it aside. There was no time for doubt. Captain, Riley said, breaking the silence, I'm detecting something ahead. A massive energy reading. It's enormous. The crew looked at each other, tension tightening the air. Carter's heart skipped a beat. What kind of energy? Riley hesitated. It's unlike anything we've ever seen. It's not coming from the alien ships. It's coming from something else. A structure, maybe. It's hard to say, but it's massive. How long until we reach it? Carter asked, his voice firm. At our current speed, about 15 minutes, Riley replied. All right, Carter said. We'll be ready. Prepare for whatever's ahead. The crew began to move with purpose, running through their procedures. They couldn't afford to be caught off guard. Whatever lay ahead, they needed to be ready for it. The unknown energy reading loomed larger on the screens, a dark shadow in the distance that threatened to consume them. 15 minutes later, the warship arrived at the source of the energy. What they saw made the crew gasp. Before them, floating in the heart of this strange, distorted space, was a massive structure. It was like nothing they had ever seen before, an enormous floating city of sorts, but made of materials that defied their understanding. The surface of the city pulsed with the same strange energy they had felt before, and as they drew closer, a faint, almost imperceptible hum filled the air, vibrating through the very hull of the ship. We're close, Carter said quietly. Whatever it is, we're about to find out. As they approached the structure, the warship's systems began to fail. The lights flickered, and the engines sputtered. Something was interfering with their power systems, but there was no turning back now. The crew braced themselves as the warship's descent slowed, coming to a stop just outside the enormous city. Carter's eyes narrowed. Prepare for landing. We need to see what's inside. And this time, we don't hold back. With a final burst of energy, the warship hovered before the mysterious city, its fate now tied to whatever lay ahead. The trial had only just begun.